Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Hope this video finds you all well, and I do apologize that it has been such a while since my last video. But yeah, things have been just ridiculous sort of thing. Every time I try to record this particular video, something just come up that something needed doing, whatever the case might be, and I just haven't managed to get around it, even though I've been wanting to get to it for quite some time now. Since I saw the subject matter that this video is concerned with, and for those of you that have been kind enough to inquire, I'm doing quite well with my cancer treatment and all that sort of thing. Virtually no side effects to speak of, so it's actually all gone. It's actually all gone and going pretty well. I'm now in hematological remission as far as the blood load of the disease is concerned, which is good. And I'm now sort of on the second targeted medication, and now it's just you know, keep taking it and carry on with life, really, sort of thing. So I've been quite fortunate as far as this whole particular issue goes, and so thank you all for those of you that that inquired. That's very kind of you, and so on and so forth. And yeah, so cracking on, praise God that everything has been good so far. Right, so ladies and gentlemen, a little while back I came across a what is essentially a meme. Now I generally prefer to avoid talking about memes and stuff like that, because it's as far as I'm concerned, for the most part, it is low-hanging fruit. It is not much thought goes into it, and I don't see that it necessarily serves any purpose, sort of thing. At least it's not the sort of thing that I want to deal with here on my channels. I mean, I'm sure there are arguments that could be made for it and stuff like that, but generally I don't like it. However, this one, there was so much important stuff behind the meme that I figured it's actually very, very well worth talking about, because there's a very, very deep psychological issue going on behind this sort of thing. And as far as I'm aware, Christians don't talk about this stuff at all, ever. There are no channels out there, Christian oriented, that actually discuss this sort of thing. So and it really stuck with me that, man, I can understand where the people are coming from, but this is so wrong. This is so let's just get into it. And I'm going to read you the meme here. So it is obviously as follows, as you can see. Stop telling people that no one will love them until they love themselves. Stop planting the idea in people's brains that they are unworthy of love because of their own struggle. Right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as someone who's very, very interested in all the psychological literature and all that kind of stuff, and now I'm going to address this specifically from a Christian perspective, because other worldviews might have a very, very different perspective. So this is formulated as an instruction to other people to stop telling people that no one will love them until they love themselves. And then it says, stop planting the idea in people's brains that they are unworthy of love because of their own struggle. Now, first of all, this particular meme has gotten the admonition completely wrong. Now, I'm sure there are morons out there who phrase this incorrectly. Nevertheless, the actual concept behind this idea that you need to love yourself so that other people can love you, at no point was it ever designed to communicate to an individual that that you are unworthy of love. I mean, that is just absolutely ridiculous. But it's trying, first of all, as an encouragement that you should love yourself, right? You really, really should love yourself. But the main crux of the matter is that regardless of that, other people that are attempting to show you affection, to show you love, and all these kinds of things, if you hate yourself, you essentially make it impossible for them to actually fulfill that role if they so desire to. So someone could desperately want to love you and show you affection, have a relationship with you, but if you do not love yourself, you essentially yourself put up a barrier to that, and then the person cannot access you. So we need to ask a couple of questions, right? Why does the individual constructing this meme, let's have a look at it, right? Why does the individual constructing this meme, A, interpret the principle in, because here's the thing, right? They said stop planting the idea. You're not planting any idea whatsoever, right? First of all, no one says this, that no one will love you unless you love yourself. No, that is not what the admonition is, right? Let's have a look quickly. Let's just have a look quickly. Specifically Christian, right? Right, we have to have a look at the issue. Have to have a look at the issue. Right? As Christians, we say, with the great commandment in the law, first of all, love the Lord your God and so on. And the second is like, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So as Christians, we understand that there is a that Jesus Christ himself says, love your neighbor like yourself. Therefore, if you do not love yourself, you cannot love, you can't love your neighbor. You know, so it's now, unlike the Western idea, specifically Protestant idea, where self-love is equivalent to narcissism, that is false. In true Christianity, we understand that the idea of this isolated, atomized individual, there's no such thing. Christ built us for relationships. We are individuals and we are community. And we know from the psychological literature that our social milieu helps us constellate our personalities, right? We need this idea that, oh, I don't need anyone, is garbage, right? Much to many people's chagrin, you need other people and other people need you, and it's a communal thing. This is what God intended. And from this we understand not only love your neighbor as yourself, therefore if you do not love yourself, you cannot love your neighbor. But we also know as Christians, if you look at tradition, we understand that to love your neighbor is to love yourself. And this is why how this relationship exists. If you break this circle in any way, then love in your life actually becomes impossible, not because other people are refusing to love you, but because you cut off, you sever that cycle yourself. Okay? So when we look at the meme, right, when we look at this meme, we see, stop, and it's an instruction to other people, right? And this is important. Stop telling people, you people out there, that no one will love them until they love themselves. This is a straw man. No one except for the most psychopathic people would ever say this, and such individuals are in fact rare. So I mean, who are they talking to, and do they really imagine that anyone that is demented enough to say such a thing, to take the principle, put it out of context in such a harsh an untrue way, that such a person will actually change their behavior just because you told them to, right? So this actually shows a narcissistic trait in the individual who is actually writing this, and the clues are there in your own struggle, because narcissists and people with personality disorders and various borderline traits, narcissistic traits, tend often, right? So you people up there, stop telling people, stop planting the idea in other people's brains. So where is the locus of control? The locus of control is external, right? The locus of control for whoever's writing this and whoever is sharing this, who says, yeah, this is true. These people believe that the locus are putting the locus of control outside rather than bringing the locus of control inside and be like, well, no matter what people say, it's not going to affect me because the locus of control is inwards. But generally speaking, what you find is that people with either personality disorders or with the traits of those personality disorders very, very often place the locus of control outside, specifically people with borderlines, so specifically women. So the person that I saw share this was a female, and the vast majority of their interactions with this particular meme were female. Like you're talking about like 90% of the interactions with this, the shares and stuff, the comments were female. And I know for a fact that a large number of those women that shared and liked and commented actually have are diagnosed clinically, officially, with BPD, with borderline personality disorder. Which is, so you immediately see something. They immediately take something, right? When someone says, "Listen, you need to love yourself so that other people are able to love you." Not that they will desire to love you, but that they will be able. You understand the difference, right? The desire might be there, but I might not actually be able to do so because you are barring access. And we're going to get into this, right? Stop planting the idea in people's brains, right? This is an assumption, right? You as an individual have taken what people are saying and interpreted it in the worst possible manner, because not everyone is going to understand it in this way. So again, this is a very, very narcissistic thing at the end of the day, telling other people, first of all, what to do, and then generalizing it as if everyone is going to interpret it this way. At no point is there any self-reflection as like, have I maybe misunderstood this admonition? Am I maybe the one who's misunderstanding something here? Rather, no, I'm so certain that my interpretation is correct, and now because my locus of control is external, and I have a struggle, right? Unworthy of love because of their own struggle. So clearly, because I have my own problems, now I must control my environment so that I must control other people, because I'm relying on other people to regulate my internal emotional states. This is actually a sign of someone who has a personality disorder and some sort of a problem. And what these individuals don't realize, right, is that you absolutely must be able to bring that locus of control internally and regulate your own emotions. You can't expect other people to do it for you. It's you just can't. And if you do, you will never ever be satisfied. You are going to constantly demand things of people over and over again. And this is essentially what the individual is doing. Stop planting the idea in people's brains that they are unworthy of love because of their own struggle. This is not what the admonition is about. So we need to understand this into what's actually going on here. So for the most part, these are going to be people with most of the time when you see stuff like this, you see women, right, sharing material like this. You can go onto any social media and you know those profiles of specifically female profiles, where it is constantly telling other people how much they don't care about other people's opinions and this and that. If you actually didn't care about other people's opinions, you wouldn't even bother telling them about it. If you actually didn't care. And you see that their Facebook profiles and stuff are full of this kind of material. On one hand, telling people, I don't care what you think. And then on the other hand, constantly telling other people how to behave because of how it affects them. Right? So you have an interesting thing, right, where the person is like trying to bring people in by telling them how to behave, but then at the same time telling them, I don't care about you and what you think and what you do. So it's a pull and a push at the same time, right? And this is actually very typical with borderlines. You have that, what they call the approach, avoidance, repetition, compulsion, right? I bring you in, but then I push you away. I bring you in, but then I push you away. And there's that cycle in a lot of people. And when you do this, the person doesn't actually know what the hell to do with you, right? How can you have a relationship in this way? And anyone that has ever been with someone with borderline personality disorder or one of the disorders will know that this is what it's like. You never know what you're dealing with. She wants, and the reason, what's going on in the individual's mind, right? And so you get men also, you need to understand this. Men also can have borderline personality disorder, and then you get, overt, the typical classic borderline, and then you get the covert borderline as well. And more often than not, males tend to be the covert borderlines. So what happens is the borderline is absolutely terrified of being abandoned. They constantly anticipate being abandoned. And the reason for this is, as we know, if you've watched other of my materials, that the borderline has got a dead primary object, what we call in the parlance a dead primary object in their infancy. So basically a dead mother or a dead father, and so on and so forth, depending on which one will happen to be the primary object, because there are situations like divorce and stuff like that, right? But more often than not is the dead mother and a dead father, right? Generally speaking, dead mother, dead father, predominantly dead mother that rejected, that abandoned. The first person that abandoned you was your primary caregiver, your primary object. Your primary caregiver as an infant is your mother. When you cried, was she there? Whatever the case might be, was she there, or were you abandoned? Was your mother a narcissist herself? Was she emotionally distant? Was she completely out? Whatever the case might be, sort of thing. Did she reject you? Did she treat you badly? Were you abused? And so all these kinds of things and stuff like that, right? So the borderline is desperate for acceptance, which is why they're constantly telling people, you need to behave like this and behave like that, and you need to love me anyway. Because essentially, right, what this is, in many ways, is a demand to be loved, right? Okay, is a demand to be loved, and they're already struggling with the idea that I'm not loved. Now, where did they get this idea from? What the borderline, and what is very, very typical of personality disorders, narcissistic personality disorder, borderline, and all these kinds of things, is that they have a part of themselves that they don't want to acknowledge, right? What's generally called the shadow, using, if we're going to use Jungian and Freudian language and all that sort of old psychoanalytic sort of lingo, is there's a shadow. There's that part of me that say that. So what's happening is I hate myself. Okay, this is the I hate myself, but it's too painful for me to acknowledge the fact that I hate myself. Okay, and so I'm going to project that shadow onto other people, and other people either become the then there's that splitting. The other people then are the shadow. They're either like me or they're not like me, and if they're like me, they're good, right? And if they're not like me, they're bad. So there's this splitting. There's no nuance in how they see other people. And then the negative part of themselves, the shadow, the part that they don't want to acknowledge, gets imposed on other people. They accuse other people of planting the idea in their heads that they are unworthy of love. It wasn't other people that put the idea there. They already had that idea from infancy, because they were abandoned by their primary object. You understand what I'm saying? They already had that idea. It is not other people that put idea into their heads. They already believe this. Okay? They already believe this. So and that idea is set in by the time you're 4 years old. Okay? By the time you're 4 years old, that's like in concrete. That's there, probably earlier, right? The individual learns to believe that they are a bad object. Okay? So what you have is, then you have yourself, right? This is you, right? Your internal object that is of yourself. You accept that I'm a bad object. But you're ashamed of this, right? A borderline and stuff experience a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of whatever. I'm not worthy of being loved. I'm not this, I'm whatever the case might be, and constantly expect abandonment. And then what happens is, well, if this is a bad object, if it's disgusting, if it's terrible, if it's whatever the case might be, well, why would you want to, if you are ashamed, make it a little bit smaller so I've got. So this is my internal view of myself is this bad object, right? I'm going to hide it. You're not going to show something that you're ashamed of. Like if you've got a scar, what do? People automatically hide these things that they're ashamed of, that they feel guilt of. So then how do you interact with the world, right? With the objects out there? Because borderlines typically, they desperately want to be loved. They desperately want to be accepted by those around them. Okay, desperately. There's nothing necessarily wrong with wanting that, but this is a desperation. This is to fulfill a need, this empty void, because of that primary abandonment. So what happens often is that and is specifically narcissists, right? Narcissists, what they do, and borderlines and many other people, is they hide that, right? So then when the external object, which is other people, right, tries to access the individual, right? So we have the person. This is their internal object, their view. This is me, who I am, that I hate myself, that whatever the case might be, right? So when this person, the external person, tries to access this person, right, because they're ashamed of this, they hide this, they block it, and they project, right, a false self. They project a false self for the external object, for the person to interact with, right? They put forward a false self. Interact with this because I'm too ashamed to actually let you in. Now here's the thing with love. Love is a two-way street. It is absolutely a two-way street. It cannot be any other way. This is how God designed it to be. I can want to love you as much as I want until I'm blue in the face. But if you do not give yourself to me in order for me to love you, my love can only go so far. You have to give yourself over to be loved. And this is what the borderline, the narcissist, all of these people, they won't do that, right? And now I'm not saying that everyone that does this is borderline or whatever, but what I'm saying is these things exist on a spectrum. So you can start right in the beginning, right? So so more or less, roughly speaking, if we talk about a spectrum, right? A spectrum of personality disorder. We are all dysfunctional, okay? As Christians, we believe we're all dysfunctional. We are sinners. And because we are imperfect, we damage each other. We damage our children. We all damaged in some way. Okay. So what happens is you can be on the very, very low end of the spectrum, the mild end of the spectrum, where you can have borderline traits or narcissistic traits, right? You're not completely, you just have some traits that are a bit borderline, that are depending on your experience and depending on your personality and all that kind of stuff, right? And then sort of towards the middle, right, you start getting what is a borderline style or a borderline style or a narcissistic style, which is then generally how it's almost like your modus operandi of how you go and sort of generally interact with the world. There's a style, a way that you go about your interactions with people and stuff like that. But even at this point, you won't actually get you don't qualify for you have borderline personality disorder certificate, medal, off you go, sort of thing. But it's very, very disordered nevertheless, and you need to look at yourself and assess yourself to see why am I doing this, and this is not actually working for me. And then right at the extreme, you then have full on borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality, the malignant narcissists, etc., right on the opposite scale. And in terms of ratio, so from the trait to the disorder, right? So you clinically diagnosed sort of thing. In terms of like 0 to however many percentage of the population, let's say, for example, that would look like that. People on this end of the spectrum are very rare. Okay, the vast majority of people are right here, either mild or to negligible to like completely severe and insane sort of thing. Okay, so when I'm talking about these things, understand that in the vast majority of cases, we're talking about people who have either borderline or narcissistic traits or borderline or narcissistic styles. All right, very, very rare. It's actually going to be uncommon that you're going to come across a person with who is full, right? Although people that would qualify for the diagnoses are increasing at absolutely phenomenal rates, and this COVID-19 crisis is actually making it even worse, right? Because of the kind of trauma that it puts in on people. Okay, so this is what we need to understand. We're not diagnosing here with people with disorders, but we are diagnosing people here with not diagnosing, but we are talking about people here who have certain ways of thinking that are rooted in very, very problematic upbringings, and now they're projecting this onto other people. Okay, so what the individual is then doing is generally is projecting a false self, right? But not only are they projecting a false self, okay, so you have a false self, right, which they project outwards. But the problem here is that this false self constantly changes. Constantly changes. There's no stability here, and the outside person perceives this as lability, as someone who is labile, constantly changing. A borderline, or someone with borderline traits or whatever, you are not dealing with the same person from moment to moment, right? How can you establish a situation with a person that's so inconsistent? You understand what I'm saying? What a lot of people, and this is the way the world is operating today, where there's elements, obviously, in all the personality disorders. There's elements of narcissism, but with an overlay of borderline or an overlay of psychopathy and so on and so forth, right? There's an element of narcissism there. And the way the world is today is it's so narcissistic that we are constantly demanding everyone else love us and accept us. However, no one can be bothered to make themselves lovable and acceptable and accessible. You know what I'm saying? So everyone is saying, I have the right to be able to be loved by you. I have the right to be accessed by you. You have to make yourself accessible to me. You have to love me. You have to treat me like I'm X and Y and Z. It's always an external, right? It's always someone else. And this is narcissistic. But me, I'm fine the way I am. There's absolutely no pressure on me to make myself lovable, to make myself accessible, to make myself consistent enough so that the person actually has something to love, right? So this is projecting something onto other people that is completely unwarranted. You're making an assumption about other people, and this is what happens. So this internal object, for the borderline, right? Most people, your internal object, right? IO of yourself is organized and integrated, right? All the different parts of yourself, right, are integrated in the one object. However, for the borderline, this is not the case. The borderline is fragmented quite significantly, in fact, and these internal objects compete with each other all the time, which is why if you speak to most borderlines, they've got what they call introjects that constantly compete, right? I was having a discussion with a borderline, and she mentioned it's like having a monkey on your shoulder. But then at other times, she would say, "Oh, there's this bitch inside her that says certain things to her," and it's very, very interesting that that sometimes in certain things she calls it a monkey, and the other times it's a bitch, which means she's not dealing with one object. She's dealing with one object. She's dealing with two. She's dealing with two different types of introjects, which are saying different things and that often compete with each other, right? And so there's chaos inside. That's what's going on. There's a lot of chaos inside, and part of what these individuals are projecting onto other people, right? So I don't want to believe, right? So this false self is good, is great, you know. Oh, I'm powerful, I'm strong and independent. You hear about that a lot, okay? I'm strong, I'm independent woman, I'm this and that and that. It's basically it's an attempt at narcissism, right? Borderlines are failed narcissists, okay? everyone with a personality disorder, except for maybe the psychopaths, right? And yeah, is except for the narcissist, the grandiose narcissist, the typical first order narcissist, all the personality, so you have narcissism. The main reason why you have the other personality disorders is because these individuals failed at developing proper full-on narcissism. Okay, the reason for that is because it actually takes a certain kind of personality profile to become successfully a narcissist. So what you require is to be a typical grandiose narcissist is low neuroticism. So let's have neuroticism, extroversion, and agreeableness. Right? So to be a successful narcissist, or to be able to be a narcissist, you want to have low neuroticism, high extroversion, and low agreeableness. Okay, but what you will typically find with people who are borderlines or covert narcissists, and like a shy narcissist or borderlines, is that they will typically have high neuroticism, low extroversion, and high agreeableness, which is literally the opposite of what is required, sort of thing. So this is their constant. So the false self in many ways is like a constant attempt at achieving grandiose narcissism, right? Which is why they constantly insist on telling you why they don't care about your opinion. You absolutely have to know about how much they don't care about your opinion and how independent they are, and blah de blah de blah, and constantly setting themselves up as gurus to tell the rest of the world about how they should or should not behave, right? Constantly telling the world, constantly trying to make mold the world into their own image, into the way that they see fit, which is what you see with activism, which is what you see in the world today. And the vast majority of activists are what? Are female, or people with a female type personality. So for example, this here is very, very typical of a female personality profile. High neuroticism, low extroversion, specifically in assertiveness, because females are typically high in enthusiasm, right? Which is why females are generally quite eager to participate. They're very participatory in events and stuff like that, which is why you see them all going out in mass for protesting and stuff like that. And then high agreeableness, which goes alongside with the enthusiasm. Yeah, let's go, and they're very pro-social and all that kind of stuff. It's why they're constantly attempting to affect the social sphere, and which is why they're constantly telling, it's always other, trying to get people to do what they want and stuff like that. And as a result, this is a very, very grandiose, telling other people what to do, how to think, how to say, and assuming that you have read their minds, right? This is mind reading. Mind reading, to assume that when a person says something, that you've understood perfectly what they mean, and you don't even bother to ask what they mean. Don't even bother to ask. You assume that you've perfectly understood what other people mean when they say, listen, you need to love yourself, otherwise you're going to struggle with relationships. That's why there's that interpretation, because of high neuroticism. High neuroticism, first of all, they're a bad object, they're ashamed, they're guilt, they hate themselves, whatever the case might be, sort of thing. So and this self is very, very sensitive to criticism, very, very sensitive to any. So for the narcissist, it's sensitive to criticism, right? Because if he's flawed in any way, it demolishes it. It becomes an affront or a risk to his grandiose false self. And for the borderline, if there's any criticism or whatever, then that's a risk of being abandoned, right? So if people don't think well of me, they're going to abandon me, right? That's generally what the fear difference is between the two. The narcissist, if people don't think well of me, then I'm not, then there's sort of like, it sort of mortifies you a little bit. It's like, oh well, I'm not as great. There's a dissonance between the grandiose self, which is basically God, and this information coming in that says you're actually a bit of an idiot, sort of thing. And there's danger that he's not going to get, if I'm not grandiose, then I'm not going to get supply from people, narcissistic supply. And then for the borderline, it means people, and also the similar thing, they both don't want to be abandoned, is this fear of abandon sort of thing, but they interact with that fear of abandonment differently, and in some extents. But there's this fear of being abandoned, right? And so yeah, there's no agency. So if I'm a bad object, if I'm what this is, this the sense of agency is gone. There's no sense of agency whatsoever, in the sense where it's always other people, it's always someone else's fault, it's always someone else that is doing or saying or thinking or behaving in a particular way that is then influencing me. Well, what about you? You need to get that agency yourself, right? And so these are the kinds of things that are going on in the minds of these people that say this kind of stuff. It's and this is what you need to realize. If you are a girl, a female, or if you are a male with typically female characteristics. So, and this is not to say you're gay or this. It's not a bad thing. This is not a bad thing to have female type personality if you are a male, if you are high neuroticism, or if you're high in agreeableness. There's nothing wrong with a man being high in agreeableness. It's fine. It's not a problem. But what I'm saying is that it puts you at a certain kind of risk. It has a certain strength, but it also has a risk associated to it, and you need to understand this. So if you are a female, right, or if you are a male with female typical type of personality, high neuroticism, so sensitivity to negative emotions, low extroversion, so you're not the assertive type, you're not that macho man kind of type, go and do be whatever, which is fine, it's not a problem, right? It's and there's nothing wrong with being the go get 'em type of hunter gatherer kind of guy either, right? So you often get this problem where the low people who are males and who are not that assertive type of dominant kind of man then criticize the men who are that way, and then the dominant type of man criticize men who are not that way. It's like, leave each other the hell alone for 5 minutes and just be what you are and accept yourself for what you are. Accept what you are, and as a result you understand your parameters and how you can deal with things, and you can then get through life. But if you constantly deny who you actually are because you dislike what you are, because you hate yourself, whatever the case might be, this doesn't work. This doesn't work at all. So this is basically what's going on with this kind of thing, in a very, very simple, basic sort of way. Stop telling people this is very grandiose to post stuff up on your wall telling other people how to be. Right? It's a direct instruction trying to influence their social sphere. So the borderline will typically bounce backwards and forwards between a kind of grandiosity orientation towards the world and a rejection of the personal, versus a rejection of the world and an orientation towards the personal. So if you are so for example, here's the fear for a borderline, like something you hear a lot women saying, right? I want to go on a voyage of self-discovery, right? I want to find myself. I want to discover myself and find who I am, right? Is because the identity is not there. There's no identity. You're probably talking someone who's having an identity crisis. You're probably talking to someone with borderline traits or even BPD, because there's no identity there. There's no person there, right? Because the identity is fragment. They don't know who they are. This is why they generally change hairstyles. They color their hair blue, they color their hair pink, they color their hair this way. They shave their hair on one side, then they shave their hair bald, and then they let their hair grow out. It's constantly changing. If you don't see the borderline for like a week and then come in, they're a completely different person, because there's no identity. The self sense of self is unstable. sort of thing. It's not there, and they're constantly trying to discover who they are. And then and this is where that approach avoidance, repetition compulsive comes in, because they will go through a phase where they're trying to discover who they are, and so they reject, they push everything away, right? For the world, because I'm going to go into the world, I'm going to discover who I am, I'm going to travel and backpack across Europe, whatever the case might be. I want to go. And then you find that they will just want to abandon everything, right? And then conversely, but they're afraid of that, right? There's a fear there. Then they will recoil, right? And then want to be consumed almost by a particular individual or particular person or a particular group, sort of thing. And or like a boyfriend or whatever the case might be. You must love me. You must, and they will approach a specific person to help them, on which they can how can you say? So when we were talking about the shadow part, right? So you have that internal, let me get that up again. So when we talk about that shadow part, what they're doing a lot of the time, so you have the shadow, right? So this is one of the internal. This is the internal object. So let's call this the rejected internal object. They reject this, that part of them they don't want to know about. Okay. So what they will do with others, right, is they will project this onto other people, the various parts of themselves, right? So this is often what they will do to a significant other, right, is project their shadow onto the person, right, onto the husband or the wife or the friends or whatever, or the world, in fact, because whatever it is they can't accept about themselves or don't quite like about, whatever the case might be, they will project that onto, and this is part of like empathy and all that kind of stuff. Watch my video on empathy. There is a lot with the borderline is doing a lot of projection, a massive amount of projection, sort of thing. So when they get, so they go between, I want to be part of the world, and I want to be grandiose, and I want to discover who I am and all that nonsense. And then there's a fear associated with, because if I go there, and then they recoil, and then they want a specific person that they can project their shadow on, that they can be accepted, and that this group of people or this person can help them, can be the anchor point for their identity. And so at all the time, what they're trying to do, what people like this are trying to do, is basically export. They're exporting a psychological function that should be internal. I should accept who I am. The process, it's like I should find out who I am, and then I need to accept it. This is why they're constantly on this discovery, the voyage of self-discovery. The reason why that voyage of self-discovery, I'm going to find myself, never ends, is because they are incapable of actually accepting what they discover. They reject it. But as long as they keep rejecting it, who they are, they'll never be anyone, because you need to integrate those parts of you, right? You have to integrate those parts of you, so the good with the bad, right? But if you reject that, right, that becomes your shadow, and the more afraid, the more it is that you reject parts of yourself, the bigger, more dense that shadow becomes. And then when you go through life, you project that on everyone else. And then the whole world, and then that's what, like we were saying earlier on, where splitting comes in. You are either absolutely wonderful and moral, and you are, and this is what you will find as well. And you see narcissists kind of do this as well in the love bombing phase, is when they first meet you and they're trying to get a hold of you, sort of thing. They virtually worship you, right? Or they demonize you. Like unbelievable. And this is what you see in the world today, specifically in the world of activism. There's no nuances in every single person. There's good qualities, there's bad qualities, and a ratio between the two. No one is all bad and no one is all good. But for borderlines and people with personality disorders, That's exactly. A person is either all bad or all good. And you as an individual, 1 minute you can be God, you can be the angel sent from heaven to save them. And in the very next minute, you could be Satan from hell. So even you yourself are never the same person to the borderline sort of thing. And this is why it is no matter how much you want to, the borderlines and people with borderline traits make it impossible for a person to effectively love them and enter into a relationship with them, because first of all, right, so the borderline, because they're constantly afraid of abandonment and all of these kinds of things, they're constantly and because also the internal object, it's a bad object. Remember that there's this bad object. I'm horrible, I'm filthy, I'm disgusting. And you often hear this from the mouths of women that have these kinds of traits. When you catch them on an off moment, or in an insecure or vulnerable moment where those guards are not up, or where they're being honest, or whatever the case might be, because there's a lot of lying involved, sort of thing. Pathological lying is very common in these kinds of things. When they speak of themselves that I'm disgusting, oh, look at this, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that, and whatever the case might be, there's a lot of disgust involved. And again, it's quite typical for women to have a very, very high disgust sensitivity, which is associated with the trait conscientiousness. And women are generally much higher in conscientiousness than men are, specifically orderliness, right? And that high orderliness is why they're constantly trying to micromanage the world. That's why that tends to be, in terms of interacting with the world, that tends to be the way that they go about it. They start to micromanage and order the world in order to try, because an ordered world means ordered internal state. And if the external world is disordered, then my internal, the boundary between the internal and the external is blurred or broken, right? And so, well, that's why they have to constantly try and order the world, which is why you get memes like this, constantly telling other people what to do and how to behave. It's like your sense of self should not depend on that. Okay, so that internal, or because it's bad, I'm on the inside because I'm bad, and whatever the case might be, and fear of abandonment and all of these kinds of things. When you try to love them, now they want love, they want you to love them. But if you say to them, listen, I love you, what will they do? They will typically treat you with suspicion. Makes sense. It makes perfectly sense. Imagine this. And this is why. Imagine this. You are walking down the street and someone just and comes up to you and says, here's a suitcase with 10 million pounds for you. Immediately you're going to be suspicious. Where does this money come from? Why do you want to give it to me? I didn't earn it. I have done nothing to deserve this. Therefore, I'm suspicious of the offer. Makes sense. It's the same thing with borderlines, essentially, right? Because I'm a bad object, because I feel this disgust about myself and all these kinds of things, what have I done to deserve this love, this great thing that I so desire, right? Because we all, 10 million pounds, we all desire it, right? Who would say no to 10? We all want it because it would make our lives so much better. It's the same thing with border. I want this love and this acceptance and this whatever, because it will bring all these psychological benefits to be loved and to be cherished and all of these kinds of things, right? Nevertheless, I'm suspicious. Why would you want to love me? Because I'm disgusting, because I'm a bad object, because I'm this and this and that. And they constantly anticipate being abandoned, right? What are you doing here? I'm suspicious of you. And for the person that is attempting to love a borderline, it'll feel, imagine the following. Imagine you go for a job interview and you get the job. But then in a week's time, you have to interview for the job again. And then you have to interview for the job again. And after a while, you get sick and tired. It's like, listen, have I or have I not proved myself? Right? And this is what it's like being with a borderline. They're constant, and a narcissist as well, right? The narcissistic male with a female, will constantly test her to see if she would be a good mother, like the good mother, because she's replacing the dead mother, right, who abandoned him, and he's trying to make her into his mother figure, right? And he's constantly testing her, right? Are you gonna be a good enough mother? Are you gonna stay despite all of my BS, right? It's the same thing. It's the same thing with borderlines, right? The constantly testing, constantly insecure, constantly whatever, and the person who is trying to have a relationship with this person is going to feel like they're forever trying to prove themselves, and then when you look at the world and you see the style of how men interact with women who have these kinds of issues, you see that they constantly require flowers, they constantly require compliments, they constantly require, and when you do not meet this very, very strict list of this very well-defined modus operandi, if you screw up at all, your love for her is immediately questioned. And in that moment of like of rage or upset and whatever the case might be, there is nothing you can do, nothing you can say. You're screwed until she calms down. Right, and then she will act out. Often what happens, there will be an acting out. They can be very punitive. You're going to sleep outside, right? They will literally kick you out the house. You're going to sleep, or they become violent. It's not uncommon for borderlines to become physically aggressive, sort of thing, screaming, shouting match, and all these kinds of things. And this is this constant cycle. Right, or they self-harm, or whatever the case might be. They will do something to punish you, and very often what happens. So for because the primary object, which was your parent, was abandoned you and was not present, and what was there, the individual fails to develop what is known as object consistency or constancy. Right, in that they do not believe that the external objects are actually going to stay or hang around. Right, and also, out of sight becomes out of mind, which is why so many borderlines actually cheat on their spouses. Because if a borderline goes away, let's say on a business trip and stuff like that, the object, which is the husband at home or whatever the case might be, almost in many ways cease to exist, which is why they find it then so easy to cheat. And then also, as a punitive measure against anyone that is offended or affronted or whatever the case might be, specifically in a relationship sort of thing, they will take punitive measures like cheat on someone or whatever the case might be. Or if they're going to preempt, and narcissists can do this as well, but specifically borderlines, if a borderline is afraid of being abandoned, in order to regain control, it doesn't mean that the other person is going to abandon her at all. But if she is afraid, desperately afraid, that the other person is going to abandon her, she feels a sense of a loss of control. Control is a massive issue for borderlines. Having to control, massive issue, which is why they tend to micromanage everyone around them, right? What you say, what you think, the thought police, right? The thought and action police is what you see again in the world today, right? In that sort of gynocentric society that is developing, sort of thing. Whether the person is going to leave or not, what they do in order to regain control, they will act out in such a way that makes the person break up with them, right? And then it's not because he was going to leave, it's because I made him do it, because I'm actually the one that's in control. It's a false sense of security, sort of thing. And that is why when you look in the world, you can see there's so many dysfunctional relationships, because the narcissist and the borderline, so the narcissistic male will insist, no, I broke up with you, or I am the reason why we broke up. And then the borderline is, no, I am the reason why we broke up. And there's this fight over who broke up with who, or who did the worst, whatever the case might be, constantly, and this is why it is, because this is the thing, right? And why do I go to personality disorders? Is because no one hates himself for no reason, right? If you didn't have that trauma as a child, and and as a result you have these traits, right? And if you were traumatized as a child, chances like almost basically guaranteed that your parents have a narcissistic or a psychopathic or a borderline traits and or styles and or full-on personality disorder, and they will have passed that down onto you. and so on and so forth. It's this cycle of violence. We do to our kids what was done to us, and so on and so forth, right? That's why I go to this sort of thing. It's these things are not coming out of just like nowhere, and we traumatize our children grow up and traumatize their children, and then and we traumatize each other, right, by behaving abusively and all these kinds of things. And a lot of these things are then self-fulfilling prophecies, because if I'm going to behave in a certain way, if I'm afraid of someone abandoning me, I'm going to behave in such a way that will eventually make the person so fed up that they will going to leave, that they will eventually leave. So there's a lot of self-acceptance that has to go on, and the self-love that has to go on, right? Now, there is self-love, and then there's self-love, right? There's self-love in a narcissistic sense, and there's self-love in a realistic sense, where you accept who you are. This is not the, oh, I'm so wonderful, and I'm the greatest, and I'm the powerful goddess, which is the BS that you see in Cosmopolitan magazine and Vogue magazine, in the media that you see out there. The self-help, discover your greatness, and that's narcissism. That's narcissistic self-love. The world promotes nothing but narcissistic self-love. That's all it does. But in Christianity, it's about an acceptance. Accept who you are, positive and negative. And once you know what is what, you can be realistic about both of them. About both of them. You can integrate all of the different parts of yourself, and then from there you can seek to improve yourself, or whatever the case might be. But a person, you need to understand something. That unbalanced focus on yourself is narcissism. That whether you believe that you are the best thing since sliced bread, or whether you think you are the worst person on the planet, both of them are narcissistic, because both are a means of aggrandizing yourself, because you're not just the worst, you are Satan himself. Nay, you are worse than Satan himself. And therefore, sort of thing. And you get that, right? I'm a naughty girl, I'm bad, you understand what I'm saying? And then there's self-trashing, right? Because I'm a bad object, I need to be punished, I deserve to be punished, I deserve to be whatever. And so they will go out, and in order to punish themselves, they will sleep around. They'll sleep with some random stranger, and then there gets alcohol involved, because that part of themselves that they don't want to acknowledge, right? Alcohol comes in, the inhibitions go, and then they can fulfill those dark desires that were always there, but which caused a bit of a conflict in the ego, sort of thing. That I don't really like that part of me, I'm going to deny that part of me. So when you bring in the alcohol, you then how can you fully embrace your shadow, as it were, those dark things that you always wanted, and then you perform them. But then when the alcohol wears off, you then have a massive dissonance. You withdraw from that. It's like, that couldn't have been me, right? Which is often why borderlines, when they do this, any man that was unfortunate enough to sleep with a borderline during a self-trashing phase will most likely be accused of rape afterwards, right? Any moron. This is why, gentlemen, don't be a moron. If she's drunk, leave her the hell alone, because she is using you to self-trash. And if she experiences a severe enough dissonance once she sobers up the next day, guess who she's going to accuse of rape? Guess who she's going to go after? Because what happens? It wasn't me. She's going to project the shadow onto you. He's the rapist. He's the one that wanted all of these evil, dark things. And I'm the innocent victim, because it is the external it's an external locus of control. I had no responsibility, sort of thing. So that's what's going on here, right? And obviously I've painted what can be a very, very dark picture in some cases, not all. So there's a spectrum of things down to like, have you ever heard the term, and forgive me for the language, but the term "them bitches be crazy"? That's where it comes from, right? That's where it comes from, because one minute she's sweet as pie, she's sweet like honey, right? And the next minute she's this raging psycho thing, right? That it's like, what the hell? Where did this come from, right? And that is a problem with with individuals, both male and female, whether it's borderline or whether it's a narcissist, because deep down inside there's this self-hatred, there's this thing that they refuse to integrate, and it disorders them, and it fractionates them. In fact, in the case of the in case of the narcissist, there is no self, right? The narcissist is not a dead person. It's a non-existent person. You're dealing with a nothingness, with an absence. And in many ways it's actually that way with someone who's borderline, fully borderline. But and this is why many women who are not fully borderline, but have these traits and stuff like that, because if you're not integrated, you feel that there's this emptiness, there's this something that is sort of possibly missing, something that's not quite, and then you're constantly looking externally to try fulfill that thing, right? And which is why then drugs, then alcohol, then sex, then boyfriends. So have you ever seen a woman that's boyfriend after boyfriend after? It changes men like she changes her underwear, basically, right? It's the same thing with males. Males do the same thing, right? They say, oh, it's a macho thing, all these conquests. No, it's the same thing. They're trying to, if it's not conquering woman, it's alcohol, it's drugs, or it's a combination of all of them, or it's gambling, or it's one of these things. And it's woman, it's the exact same thing. Woman is the exact same thing. In fact, when a woman is so some of the conceptions are saying that borderline is the female form of sociopathy. It's the female psychopath is a borderline on a very bad day kind of thing, and they can switch between these kinds of behaviors, which is why they can be so sweet and pro-social, but at the same time these insecurities and these fears and this dissonant way which they deal with the world. There's a lack of reality testing. When they try to see what is really there, what's really going on, they're not able to, because the reality testing is not there, and so they will misinterpret things, and often what they think they see over that is going on outside is not actually what's going on outside. It's something that they're projecting on the world. The world is almost like a canvas on which it's like when they're trying to look at the world, they're not really seeing the world. They're seeing a canvas upon which they project everything that is internal, which is why they call borderline, because the line between internal and external is often confused and blurred, even though, unlike the narcissist, the borderline has internal objects and has external objects, whereas the narcissist, it's only internal. There are no external objects. Everything is internalized. They consume you, right? They snapshot you and consume you, right? The borderline is a little bit different sort of thing. And so this is why you have to get to the point where you accept yourself. Once you've accepted yourself, you can start constellating yourself. You can start developing a sense of who you are, an identity, so that you have something to offer, because the love is like a circle, right? I offer you my love. I extend the hand. You have to take it, right? And this is something we learn as Christians with God, right? God extends his hand. He says, I love you. Here's my hand. Let's do something, right? Let's do something. And he's waiting for us to extend our hands and take his, so he can pull us in, and you can come into each other and have a relationship. But if I don't extend my hand, and this is what borderlines, people who write stuff like this, they're saying, you need to have a relationship with me, even though I never extend my hand. And the reason they don't, and we need to, we mustn't hate them, we mustn't whatever sort of thing. But to understand them, no, they didn't choose to be this way. No one chooses to be this way and stuff. So don't hate these people, don't whatever, but understand what's going on. And you as an individual, if you're doing this, if you hate yourself and stop doing it. It's not that no one wants to love you. People want to love you. It is the preference. And you need to understand this, and you need to accept it. It is the preference of human beings to love each other and to get along. It's what we prefer to do. We prefer to get along. The problem is we get in our own way and we screw it up, okay? We prefer. You need to stop hating yourself, and whatever part of yourself you don't like, don't do the splitting thing. You're not either all good or no one is either all good or all bad. We are all a mixture of both. And accept what you are, good and bad, because the bad parts are as much you as the good parts are as much you. And until you learn how those things fit together and interact and stuff, you will not going to have anything that is solid enough that you can actually give to someone for them to love that thing. I mean, if you have no sense of self, if you are not something solid, what are you going to give to the other individual? Right? Because here's the problem then. Let's say you get into a relationship. Not only is the other person unable to love you, you are unable to actually love that individual, even yourself. You are preventing yourself even from a true sense of love, because then the relationship becomes utilitarian. You're not in the relationship for that person for their own sake. You're in that person in the relationship because, again, you are the reason you're getting into that relationship is because you're intending to export psychological functions onto this person. They're providing you a psychological service more than you are actually engaging in a meaningful relationship. Right? You're using it as like it's not a relationship, it's a service basically that you're trying to get from this other individual. And as soon as they don't provide that service, right, then what do? You will throw a tantrum and you'll write a letter to management. Why didn't I get my service? I paid for my service, didn't I? Right? And then you become don't go by that shop, they don't deliver the service, sort of thing. And that's what's going on, right? It's in a sort of a nutshell, that's what's going on. And you gotta go and look, get that introspection and look at yourself. Whether you like what you see or not is irrelevant. If you don't like what you see, doesn't matter, just put up with it. It's okay. You can still be loved. Because this true love, and this is why, because the whole concept of love out there has become completely twisted. And this is why you should become a Christian. Because true love is unconditional. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Right? God gave his Son before most people even knew who he was. God has given himself and of himself for the sake of people who don't even know he exists. He loves you before you even know he exists. This is true love, okay? My love has nothing, right? For me to love another person in the Christian sense, it's love your neighbor as yourself. This is an instruction. It doesn't say love your neighbor if he's a nice person. Love your neighbor, but if he's an asshole, then you're free to not. No. Love. End of story. In fact, if he's an asshole, you should love him even more. Right? That's why it's so difficult to be a Christian. Because love has nothing to do with the other person. The idea that we are worthy or deserve love is irrelevant, because that's the beauty of love. Love is something that is given in spite of you. Right? My wife loves me in spite of the fact that sometimes I'm a moron. That is why love is great. It's precisely because not only do I not deserve it, I will never deserve it. None of us. That's why love is great, is because love ignores that. Love doesn't care what you are or what you were. It's only concerned with what you could be. It's only concerned with what you could be. And for your value, your intrinsic value, whether you know it or not, you are an individual, and you might not understand who that individual is. Your internal state might be fragmented, but there is a person in there somewhere, and you need to find it. You need to find him or her. Figure out who that person is, good and bad, right? Good and bad, get it all in, right? Imagine this. Imagine the following, right? Imagine the following. Right, a person is like a precious metal. When you go and digging in the ground and you pull that precious metal out, for most people, most people would not recognize the precious metal as it comes out of the ground. Why? Because there's so many impurities, right? But you pull it out of the damn ground anyway. right? You go in there, and it's the true for all the metals. It's for all the materials that we pull out of the ground come with impurities, diamonds, everything, right? And then the diamond, you've got to cut it, and you've got to because when it comes out of the ground, it's just this lump of rock. It's actually not even particularly, it's not even particularly attractive. Same thing with gold and silver and all of these kinds of things you pull out of the ground. It looks like rocks. Most people would walk right past it and not even know, right? But you have to take it. You have to pick it up and accept it. This is gold, right? You, whether you hate yourself or not, you are gold, just with some impurities, right? But if I'm going to reject, right? Imagine this. I'm a miner, and unless I dig that gold up from the ground, already when I dig, there's the gold bar, perfect, 24 karat, beautiful. If I reject everything other than a perfectly formed gold bar, then I will reject every piece of gold I find, and then I will never be successful as a miner. Never. Complete. I understand that while I'm digging, everything I pull out is going to have impurities, and then it goes through a process of refining everything until you've got the final product. And this is what Christianity is about. This is what love is about. Love is designed to pull you up, impurities and all. Impurities and all, and then over time refine you to become not a false, but it brings out the pure form of you. And we're all different people are at different processes of refinement, right? We're all at different places in the process, but there's not a single person alive today who's at the final stage, gold bar, shiny, faceted. None of us are in that state. No one are in that state, right? And this is what love is meant to be for human beings, right? When love is true, right? When love is true, love is that I will treat you with love, regardless of who you are. That process can then refine. Not as obviously this undiscerning, idiotic nonsense where because I can love someone doesn't mean that I become an idiot as one and allow myself to get taken advantage. That's then not love, right? Because if you allow yourself to get taken advantage of, then because the love is concerned about the other individual. Proper love is I give the love and it's unconditional and stuff like that. However, if I become a doormat to the other person, then rather than loving them, I'm enabling the bad behavior and therefore they never improve. You understand what I'm saying? So like for example, borderlines are very, very concerned with being judged, which is why they pretend to not care about other people's opinions, sort of thing. But love is judgmental in many ways. Love says, listen, you've got impurities. But it also says, I'll hold your hand and I'll be there with you through the refining process. Because I know your worth. I know your worth. Right? The impurities don't actually devalue you. Okay? The impurities don't actually devalue you. However, if you insist and you become resistant, resistant to refinement and all these kinds of things, then no one can do anything with it. Right? Because people want the gold. People want the gold. But if for some reason this rock had to decide, no, screw you, I'm gonna stay the way I am, then the people would discard them because I can't do anything with you. I want to do stuff with you. But you refuse, right? Because there's free will. You need to understand there's this free will thing as well. You have to want to. You have to say, yeah, I will give myself to you. I will give myself over to this, right? It's not just about people offering, because again, like to reiterate, you see this out there in the world, right? You must do this. You must be, it's always you. You must be more loving. You must behave like this. You must behave like that. You must be this and this and this and that. Like, well, what about me? What must I do? What's my role in this? You know? And if I don't offer myself to the process, right? If I don't actually offer myself up into the process, The world can't do anything with you, right? No matter how much it wants to. If we lived, imagine, if we lived in the perfect world where everyone was absolutely perfectly loving beyond all comprehension, society was perfect, we lived in utopia, right? And even in that state, if you hated yourself, if you didn't accept yourself, you would not be able to find love. Even though it's there right under your nose, you wouldn't find it. Why? Because you've put yourself in a condition where you wouldn't see it, even though it's right there. You'd be suspicious of it. Right? You'd be suspicious of it. You'd second guess it all the time. Yeah, and unfortunately, we live in a type of world where the suspicion is warranted. Yeah, where suspicion is warranted. I'm not saying it's not. But that's where you got to be a little bit prudent and all that kind of stuff. But be very careful. Not everything depends on other people. A lot depends on you. You know, you're not on an island. You interact, and you've got to open up. And you can't give yourself, like I said, you can't give yourself over if you don't first know who you are. Because what are you giving over then? If you don't even know who you are, how is the other person going to know? Right? The other person doesn't have access. The other person can't read your mind and heart unless you open up and reveal your mind and heart to them. Right? A true person, someone who truly loves properly and all that kind of stuff, if you open up, and even if it's bad, they'll say, fair enough, they'll still love you. Be honest, and you're going to get idiots that reject you. Rejection is part of life. Rejection is part of life. We all get rejected. Every last one of us. Every last one of us get rejected plenty. Which is fair enough. Fair enough. But we all get accepted a lot as well. But you can't force people to accept you. Right? You can't force people to accept you, and it does you no good to despise people who don't accept you, because you need to be loving as well. And being loving means that you accept people's decision not to love you. That is a loving thing to do. If someone chooses not to love you, it is the loving thing to do is to accept it. Say, you don't love me, you don't want to be around me, you don't want to. No problem. No problem. Go with God. Does you no good to force the issue, because you can't force love. You can't force love. Because if you try force love, all you're going to do is get pretense. It won't be genuine. That's why all of these things with this hate speech and anti-hate speech and anti-this and anti-that, whatever, you're not actually making people more loving. All you're doing is making them more secretive and more false. Because then they're treating you nicely, not because they like you, but because they're too afraid to say anything, because the government is going to get them also. You don't want to live in that kind of world. You don't want to live in that kind of world. And that is what it's like to live with a borderline, right? Living with a borderline and a narcissist is like living in a police state, where you're not allowed to say what you really mean, what you really think. And anything that you say could be misconstrued as treason against the state. And then, punitive prison with you. Right, this punitive system. That's what it's like to live with someone who is insecure, who hates themselves, who can't accept themselves, and all these kinds of things, who has these struggles. Right? The problem is not that you have the struggle. Right? The problem is not that you have the struggle. If you're struggling, that's fine. That's not the problem. The problem is how you treat those. Is how you treat other people as a result of that struggle. Right? And if you didn't treat people, in a manner that they didn't deserve, you'll find that they will even stand with you during your struggle, and they'll help you through your struggle, and they'll even suffer with you. They'll suffer along with you, man. People are willing to do that. They'll suffer along with you. But you can't keep kicking them in the teeth. You can't keep them. You've got to accept that this person is really there for you. At some point, you have to accept that this love is genuine, no matter what you think of yourself. Right? There's a lot of acceptance that needs to go along in the world. And most of it has to do with individual people accepting themselves. Because a lot of this stuff out there, the self-acceptance stuff, is not true self-acceptance. Most of this, the vast majority of self-acceptance out there is false self-acceptance. There is very, very little of genuine self-acceptance going on. Very, very little. Most of it is a narcissistic or a borderline projection of a false self. Whilst in the background they actually still hate themselves, but they, for the world, they've projected this hologram that of this thing that doesn't really exist, so that when someone tries to reach for it, their hands go right through it. There's nothing there. Are you doing that? You are doing that. You need to stop. And I know it's easier said than done, but you got to stop doing that. You got to stop doing that. You gotta move from the hologram to something concrete that someone can actually grasp, and that you can actually grasp yourself. That's the most important part. Something that you can yourself take in your hands and be like, yeah, this is what I am. This is me. Then you know what to do with yourself. Yeah. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's my 2 cents. I thought this was very important. I hope that helps. You know, if you have any questions, if you think this was nonsense, and you know, if there's any mistakes I've made, you know, because I'm not a psychologist. You know, this is just what I know from reading and research. But you know, if I've made a mistake, ignore it. Right? There's people out there. There's a professor, Sam Vaknin. Go check out his channel. This guy, he knows his business. You know, if I say something that contradicts what he says, ignore what I said and listen to what he says. Or one of these qualified professional people, right? Anything. But life coaches, stay away. Life coaches, these people are charlatans. Anyone who's telling you that to show your greatness, all of these life coaches, motivational speakers, ignore them. They are teaching you false love. Right? Find yourself a decent person that is not, you know, find God and find godly people, truly godly people. Because let me tell you, and which is difficult, because let me tell you, most Christians are morons. Most of us, and no wonder, most people are morons. Most of us don't know what we're doing, but some of us do, right? Go and find, you know, such a person. But you know, stay away from this. Stay away from this. You know, stop telling people that no one will love them until they love themselves. And notice, this person is clearly talking about themselves. But it says here, stop, you know, see how personal yet impersonal this is? Right? So it's personal. Stop telling people that no one will love them until they love themselves. Stop putting the idea in people. So someone had to sit down and write this. But you can see there's the dissonance. This is personal yet not personal. My struggle, but you know, let me transpose this onto a group external from me, sort of thing. Yeah, this doesn't work. This kind of thing doesn't work. Yes, if there are people saying stuff like this, yeah, then you know they should stop. But telling them is not going to change anything, right? You can't demand, right? Because A, people have free will, and B, someone who is being unsavory, if it's not because they don't know and you tell them, oh, you need to stop doing this because this is a really, really bad thing. It's like, the reason they don't know is because they don't care. It's not because they don't know. People who are being unsavory, they know they're being unsavory. They're doing it on, what makes you think, oh, now that you've told them to stop, it's gonna, no. And stop relying on whether these people will or will not change their behavior in order for you to go and have a good life. Stop relying on what other people will or will not do. Not going to help you. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your time. God bless. Take it easy and accept yourself. And know that God loves you no matter who you are. He's already died for you. He's already opened the way. He has his hand extended. All you need to do is reach out and take his hand and be willing to go through the refining process and accept, because there's so many people out there who are like, oh, but must accept me as I am. Yes, God accepts you who you are, but it doesn't mean you should stay that way. Only a narcissist believes that he's perfect and doesn't need to change. If you genuinely believe that you are not, if you genuinely accept that you're not perfect, then you will understand that when you take the hand of love from God, that you, in the process, it means you're going to change. Not because he's trying to change who you are in your essence, but because he's trying to uncover who you are in your essence. Just like impurities being removed from gold. He's not trying to the love of God is not trying to is not the attempt to transmute gold to lead. It is the attempt to take unrefined gold and refine it into pure gold. That's what it is. So it's not this judgmental thing, and not that. Even though a lot of people make it out to be. I know. But anyway, I've spoken enough. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Cheerio. God bless. Take it easy.